Good evening, I'm Hafiz Mazuki. Our top stories for tonight. According to Trump, Israel agrees to conditions for a 60-day ceasefire. And Iran enacts law suspending cooperation with IAEA. All this and more coming up on Awani International. US President Donald Trump says Israel has agreed to conditions to finalize a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza. He adds that during the proposed ceasefire, the US will work with all parties to end the war. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said Qatar and Egypt would be responsible for delivering the final proposal. Israel has yet to confirm whether it has agreed to the terms of the deal. And there has been no immediate comment from Hamas. Trump's announcement comes a week before he is due to host Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington. The president said he believes Netanyahu wanted to end hostilities in Gaza, and Israel's ambassador to the United Nations has also said his country was ready for a ceasefire. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has given his final approval that would enact a law suspending cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA. This move follows a 12-day war involving Israeli and US strikes on Iran's nuclear and military sites. On June 25th, a day after the ceasefire, Iran's parliament overwhelmingly passed the bill to cut cooperation with the nuclear watchdog. It was later approved by the Guardian Council for receiving final ratification from the presidency. Under the law, IAEA inspectors are barred from entering Iran unless the security of its nuclear sites is guaranteed, subject to approval by Iran's Supreme National Security Council. Iran has repeatedly denounced the IAEA for failing to condemn US strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities and stressed that Tehran will take all necessary legal measures to defend its rights to peaceful atomic energy. We'll have more after the break. Stay tuned.
They must be feeling the pressure now. This is when your mind can play games.
Quiet, please.
But this is Wimbledon.
Wimbledon, live in 4K UHD on SPO TV.
The US bombing of Iran's Fordow nuclear site has seriously and heavily damaged the facility. Now, this is according to Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. He says Iran's Atomic Energy Organization is assessing the damage and will submit its report to the government soon.
His comments follow conflicting reports about the true extent of damage caused by the US strikes. The US joined Israel's coordinated attacks on June 21st, targeting Iran's key nuclear sites in Fordow, Isfahan, and Natanz. US President Donald Trump claimed the strikes completely and totally obliterated Iran's nuclear program. But a US intelligence report disputes that, saying the attacks only delayed progress by a few months. Nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, also warned that Iran could resume uranium enrichment within months. Araghchi yesterday insisted that Iran's nuclear program remains intact and that they could quickly repair damages and make up for lost time, adding that giving up uranium enrichment was never an option.
The Trump administration is pausing some weapons shipments to Ukraine, including air defense missiles, following a review of US military spending and foreign aid commitments. The decision comes as Ukraine faces heavy Russian airstrikes, with President Volodymyr Zelensky calling on Western allies to boost air defense support.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth approved the review, which had been ongoing for months. It's unclear if aid to other countries will also be impacted. The US has been Ukraine's largest military donor since Russia-Ukraine conflict began in 2022, providing air defense systems, drones, rocket launchers, tanks, and more, sparking concerns over US stockpiles. But support has shifted since Trump's return to office, raising questions about future aid for Kiev. In March, Trump briefly halted all military shipments to Ukraine following a tense Oval Office exchange with Zelensky, resuming deliveries a week later. At last week's NATO summit in The Hague, Trump signaled a potential change in stance, suggesting more Patriot missile systems could be sent to Ukraine.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio hosted his Australian, Indian and Japanese counterparts on Tuesday, seeking to boost efforts to counter China, even as trade and other bilateral disagreements introduce friction into the relationships. Rubio also held separate meetings with Takeshi Iwaya of Japan, Subrahmanyam Jaishankar of India, and Penny Wong of Australia.
The four countries, known as the Quad, share concerns about China's growing power, but ties have been strained by US President Donald Trump's global tariff offensive, from which none of the members have been spared. Indian Foreign Minister Subrahmanyam Jaishankar nevertheless said the meeting had been very productive. The meeting offers a chance to refocus attention on the region seen as the primary challenge for the US after Trump was distracted by issues elsewhere, including the recent Israel-Iran conflict. In January, the Quad said it would meet regularly to prepare for a leaders' summit in India later this year.
A prominent Chinese Communist Party publication has called for a crackdown on competition that sparks price wars and squeezes profits, criticizing major firms and local governments for unfair practices. The party's Chu Shi article warns that price wars waste resources and drive unsustainable debt, threatening long-term growth.
This comes amid rising deflationary fears in China and US President Donald Trump's tariffs, which jeopardize the global demand vital to China's growth targets. In the recent weeks, China has intensified criticism of price wars, with top leaders vowing to increase regulation against aggressive price cutting. In the Chu Shi article, focused on involutionary competition, where firms and local governments invest heavily to gain market share despite weak demand and stalling revenue growth. It highlighted sectors like photovoltaics, lithium batteries, electric vehicles, and e-commerce platforms. Last month, solar producers urged an end to price wars, while Eastern Chinese car dealers recently warned that automakers are pushing below-cost sales, raising inventory and cash flow risk. The Chu Shi article also highlighted problematic corporate behaviors such as compromising on product quality to cut costs, thus weakening innovation and reduces research and development investments that harms overall consumer interests.
The Dalai Lama has confirmed he will have a successor after his death. He says the Garden Phodrang Trust, which he founded, will have sole authority to recognize his future reincarnation.
The Dalai Lama stressed that no one else would have any such authority to interfere in this process. He made the remarks during a week of celebrations to mark his birthday in the Indian town of Dharamshala, where he lives in exile. Beijing, which regards the spiritual leader as a separatist, has rejected his statement, saying that his reincarnation must be approved by the Chinese government in accordance with local laws and regulations. A foreign ministry spokesperson added that identification must follow the lot drawing system, a practice used to select 3 previous Dalai Lamas, though not the current one.
This week on Wu Says, we take a closer look at what is best for the rest of the West to move forward. Now, this includes issues concerning the global economy as well as climate change. Melissa Idris discusses this with Professor Emeritus Dato Dr. Wu Wing Tai.
And you think about the rest of the West, these countries that are traditionally allies of the United States. There's no kind of coalition. It's really just a grouping of friends the friends of my friends are your friends as well. So how do we think about this divergence and how they can move forward in picking up the ball that America has dropped in terms of global leadership on the issues that you talked about, on economic development, sustainable development. Is there a way to do this without alienating the US?
Well, you certainly do not want to alienate the US, because we should be doing this work on promoting sustainable economic development, protecting free trade, is not being in the US. It's not being against the US. If the US chooses not to participate, we respect the wishes of the US. But we then should not just continue to wait until the US gets over its populist phase and come back and supply the leadership. We should try to keep things moving until the US returns to the family of nations. And this could be done quite quickly. For example, the rest of the West could begin with the G7 being the G6 now. It's very symbolic that in the official photograph of the last G7 meeting, Donald Trump was not there. Because why? He had to leave early so that he could bomb Iran the next day. But that, of course, is not the stance of the other G7 countries. Things could move largely because we already have the United Nations. And we also have the G6 and EU. But to be more global, because it should not just be the rich countries taking the lead, we should also, ASEAN, Malaysia as the chair of ASEAN, should offer to join this group of European powers to work together to lead the world to carry out the mission of the United Nations and the WTO.
Catch the full conversation of this on all Awani international social media accounts at Power Affairs.
In order to meet the current challenges of the world, Professor Emeritus Dr. Wu Wing Tai suggests a reform of the UN. He touched about this during the latest session of Wu Says.
But we could, instead of giving up on them, we should work to reform them. For example, reforming the United Nations is exceedingly important. Just look at the most important partners of the United Nations, which is the Security Council. The Security Council has as permanent members the US, Russia, China, UK, and France. This was the power structure at the end of World War II. But if you look at it today, that is just way out of line with what the world distribution of economic weight is, and in terms of population. So I think that we need to do two things. We need to expand we got to make the United Nations reflect more like what the world is like today. Specifically, we should bring 2 more countries from Asia into the Security Council, 2 more members from Latin America, and 2 members from Africa. I think that would be the first step. The second step is to amend the system of veto. We mustn't let a situation where one country can stand against the will of the rest of the world. You might have changed the veto system such that you need at least 3 countries to veto before it could be a veto.
That report wraps up Awani International tonight. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies, and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more. Be sure to follow our social media accounts at Power Affairs. I'm Hafiz Marzuki. Thank you for watching. Good night.